My heart is racing just thinking about all this. Hey everyone, before I start typing, just know that before last night, I had zero encounters with paranormal cryptids or anything of the sort. They interested me as stories and such, but I never put much stock into them. 2 nights ago, my friend Pat and I were out hunting in my timber in Illinois. It is a large area with miles of woods and fields surrounding it. There isn't a town for about 10 to 15 minutes, depending on which direction you go. So, anyway, we were out last night at sunset and a bit beyond that, when we started to get a weird feeling. We set our bait in the fields and things were fine. No bites or coyotes though. We decided to move our bait closer to the timber and post up on top of some hay bales. We had our backs to the woods. We started hearing noises but chalked it up to raccoons, possums, etc. We also saw some deer right before we set up. We started to hear this weird whistling sound, coming from off in the distance. It started as soon as we got near the area with the woods. At first, it sounded like a bird, but it also sounded weirdly metallic and broken. We shrugged it off as a bird for a while and went back to our hunt. We both had AR-15s and 9mm handguns, so we weren't really worried. The whistling continued and it unnerved us more and more as it happened. It then started happening across the field at another tree line. We started to get a feeling that we were being watched. We later theorized that the whistling might have been some sort of communication/tracking method. At this point, we are spooked. So we head back to the car which is parked along another section of the woods. All of a sudden, everything goes silent. The wind, the birds, and the bugs stop. Everything stopped. Total silence. Then, all of a sudden, we hear the whistling again and it's coming from every section of the woods now. There's rustling coming from everywhere. We jump in the car fast as possible and haul ass out of there. We go and pick up our friends. They don't really believe us. Abby and Cody believe in cryptids and the paranormal, but think we might be imagining things. Ariel thinks we're just being paranoid, so anyways we pick them up and head back to the area. We call it the Moody Farm by the way. They want to check things out too, so we load up the rifles, distribute guns, and head out. Abby and Ariel stayed back in the car, while Pat, Cody, and I went out and looked around. The whistling started again as soon as we got out there and Cody began to realize that maybe we weren't lying or playing a prank. This is where things really start to ping my danger signals like crazy. We push farther along the trail and start looking for where our bait is located. We reach the bait and we still hear the whistles. I get this random thought, that maybe the bait is now being used for us, instead of the coyotes. Cody saw the eyes this time too and was starting to freak out a bit. We pushed farther in and we hear this strange noise. I call for a halt, and Pat and I set up as good as a perimeter as we can, instructing Cody to watch the flank. I call out to the woods, instructing whoever is out there, to come out, that they're on private property, and that I am armed and will shoot if I feel threatened. Suddenly, Pat yells out, "What the F is that thing?" I snap over to look and I see this blur of movement from behind the hay bales. It was covered in shadows and I couldn't see it super clearly. But to me, it seemed like it was something that was 8 or 9 feet tall that was trying to hunch over to around 6 feet. Trying to hide behind the hay bales. It's also moving pretty fast. I yell out for everyone to move, and I pop 3 shots off at it with my rifle. At first, we're moving swiftly, but at high ready. We have Pat out front with Cody in the middle. Pat's watching the woods, while Cody is trying to cover the bean field. I'm watching the flank. We were now trying to get back to the group. I catch another blur and pop off another 3 rounds, trying to lay down some suppressing fire to whatever the F is now following us. The whistles start to ring out louder now, and I hear a large cracking noise from the woods. I give the order to run and we start running in the same marching order. Pat, Cody, then me. Every 25 feet or so, I'd turn and fire off a few rounds into the woods, in hopes of scaring off and covering our asses, against whatever this was. We get back to the car and Ariel instantly thinks we're messing with them. We load up and haul ass out of there. It might be worth mentioning, that we saw a group of deer at the entrance to the field both times before all this started. We drove up to the barnyard where we were gonna have our bonfire and tried to calm down a bit, but it doesn't end there. We believe we were chased all the way up to the barnyard. I didn't really see any of what was happening next, cause I was reloading mags / messing with other stuff. But Pat and Cody call out that they saw something look around the corner of one of the barn-like buildings. This thing then slinked away. They also claim to have seen some sort of face looking at us through a hole in the wall. I make the call to leave and we start to head out. Except, for some reason, Abby can't see out her rear mirror and has to have Pat direct her out. So he's out there, extremely exposed, trying to guide her car out. I pull up close to them and then jump out trying to help cover/get some extra eyes out there. We eventually make it out and are driving off back to my house, which is only about 3 to 5 minutes away. Flash forward to the next day, around noon 1 p.m., and I get the great idea to go out there alone and check the bait piles. I felt a little more confident since it was during the middle of the day. Well, I never made it to the bait. The whistling started pretty quickly and then I heard sounds like something running through the woods and crashing through stuff. I'd never run so fast in my life, I swear. I've had this strange sense of dread since then. Thankfully, it's gone now, cause it was making me extremely paranoid. I don't know what you guys think about this, but that's my story. It is worth mentioning I'm US Army, infantry, and Pat is a cop. This happened to me when I was a kid, and I had 2 separate run-ins, over a period of 1 year. Once in the summer and once in the winter. I'm Canadian, and this took place in northern Ontario in the Lake Superior region. When I was 12 to 13, a couple buddies were over at my house. And we would play manhunt. My cousin and I were out together, and there's thick woods that bordered on a small, maybe 10-acre field. This field had corn planted, and the corn was at its peak. So like 8 to 12 feet tall. We walked into the corn a few rows. I was leading and then my cousin grabbed my shoulder. I looked back at him and he was absolutely frozen and looked petrified. I slowly turned to where he was looking, and a couple of rows over, was this massive dog? And when I mean massive, it was fucking huge. It was on 2 feet, but it was squatted down with its forearms on its knees. It had these weird long tufts of hair hanging down off its elbows. Jet black in color. Its snout was missing the skin and looked like it was half bone. It also had these solid yellow eyes. It was at least 6 inches taller than I am now and I'm 5'11". I'm 33 now, and can remember it like it was yesterday. I got a really good look at the thing as it was broad daylight. Thinking about it 20 years later, chills me to the core. I can remember what its breathing sounded like and the smell of its breath. I heard rustling behind me, and when I turned to look, my cousin was in a full-on sprint in the opposite direction. I didn't look back. I just ran, and I remember thinking, well, this is it for me, this thing is going to kill me. I didn't hear anything from behind, so I don't think it gave chase. I never told anyone about it. Fast forward to the winter. We have a conservation area, with a massive pond at the bottom of a huge hill. We sled and snowboard on this hill. Me and 2 of my friends were there later at night. It was lit up with large overhead lights. We were at the top of the hill, strapping our snowboards up, and my buddy Andrew says, "What in the hell is that?" He pointed to the bottom of the hill down at the water's edge. And there it was. It turned and started to run up the hill. And how I knew it was the same thing, was the fur hanging off the elbows. This hill is a solid 100 to 120 meters, and there was about a foot of snow on the ground. This thing went from the bottom of the hill, all the way to the top, and into the tree line. In about 8 to 10 seconds flat. We were pretty far away, but we all thought it was about 7 to 9 feet tall. I saw it again. I spoke to one of my buddies who had seen it that night, a couple of years ago. His account was exactly as I remembered. I'm not sure what the hell I saw. But I saw something that I have absolutely no logical explanation for. And I know 3 other people who also saw it. So I know it wasn't some sort of hallucination. I'm Alexander, 20 years old, and I live in Austria. I finally got my first real job, after graduating from a technical school. I am very happy with my current life. But, recently, memories started to pop up and I can barely sleep. I had the feeling I need to talk to people, about what I witnessed over the course of years. Only 3 people know about this until now. My fiancé, my mother, and my grandfather. I grew up in a pretty rural area here in Austria. We moved there when I was 6, and since then, I saw things. It began by having the feeling of being looked at, when passing our windows at night. Initially, I thought it might just be me being a bit scared by the dark. Usually, I saw our cats outside of the windows and mostly it was nothing. One day, I remember going down to grab myself a bottle of water and I saw them, looking at me from the outside. We had a Wintergarten. I don't know the English term, but it's basically a small room attached to the main building. It's completely made out of glass. In front of the Wintergarten, on the outside, was a floor made of gravel. They were 2 to 3 different creatures, of different heights, crawling on long, skinny arms. Grayish skin tone. I would say a mix of gray with a slight touch of brown. No hair, just skin. I can't remember the number of fingers or the toes. I remember the shape, but I did not count. Oh, and they had no eyes. They had humanoid bodies, but were very long and skinny. I can only describe their body type as one of those very skinny, prepubescent kids from school. The big one was around 2.5 meters in height, since the kindergarten was that height as well. The second one was a bit bigger than me, when I first saw him. So, I assume about 1.60 to 1.70 meters. I am a bit ashamed, because I am crying now while writing this. They stared at me, walked around the house, and peeked through the second set of windows. I did not scream because I was shocked. I did not want to move, breathe, look directly at them, or move away. After a period of time, they moved away towards the forest. About 5 meters away from the house. I ran to my bedroom and hid under my blanket. The next morning, I decided to not tell my father or my mother, because it felt unreal. Did I actually see something? Was it a dream? The feeling when I saw them, was like a curtain fell down. So, years pass, and I am now 17. I could barely remember what happened at this point, but I gained an insane fear of the outside at night. I felt watched any time I peeked my head out the window. At that point, I was only living in my parents' house on the weekends, because I already moved to the housing my school had. Approximately 1.5 hours from my home. I'd think it was a Saturday. I went down to make myself a midnight snack, and I saw them again. Their heads turned in my direction. Their movement was similar to an animal looking at you, when walking to a different spot. Peeking, looking, and walking. The shock kicked in and I didn't move. After about 20 minutes, I moved because they showed no aggression and just looked at me. I grabbed my water and ran up to my room. I cried, out of shock I think. In the following months it happened again, and again. To the point that I got used to pulling myself together and moving. I would eat cornflakes while they watched me. At this point, I was already convinced I had gone insane. Everything I saw had to be an illusion. Hyper-realistic schizophrenia. Or something like that. After I turned 18, I started looking a bit closer at how the surroundings reacted to them. The gravel. The stones moved by their movement. They were moved by their arms and feet. Ever so slightly, just like when you or I would step on it. The shock set in again. I started crying. Again. They moved, as always, slowly around the house, then back into the forest. Here's the night that haunted me the most. Every time I try to recall this night, I go into shock. There was a balcony in front of my big window, with the door leading out to it. In front of the balcony, was the gravel floor. Basically, the kindergarten's roof was my balcony. It was a very warm night, so I had my door open fully. I had the curtain blocking potential insects from flying in. I was lying in my bed, trying to sleep. I hear steps on the gravel. Could have been cats, but I kept listening. I used the indirect light, from the screen of my smartphone, to look towards the curtain. The curtain moved slightly to the side. The head peeked in. The biggest one of them climbed up the kindergarten, on top of the balcony. Shock set in and my body didn't want to move out of fear. The head moves back, and the curtain wiggles a bit from it. I hear gravel sounds again. I moved away a few weeks later, because I couldn't do my mandatory internship from there. I never saw them again. Afterward, I finally started talking about it with my mother, fiancé, and later my grandfather. I am sorry for my poor grammar, and also for the lack of detail. This is more from the heart. I'm currently watching Stranger Things with my fiancé. Watching this brought back a lot of the trauma. Thank you for your listening.